Yes. Good morning, Dr. Austin, my fellow classmates. How are you all doing today? Y'all, welcome to my week three presentation in which a peer-reviewed article will be used to examine and analyze to present an health-related issue using an epidemiological approach. My name is Oluduro Olaiwola Gabriel. I'm originally from Nigeria. I'm a corpsman in the Navy, currently stationed in overseas. I'm looking forward to completing my master's someday soon so that I can get commissioned as an healthcare administrative officer in the Navy. That's always been my goal. Um, I look forward to that. All right, let's go straight to the background of my study. Um, it is well known that the common expression of probability have different meaning to different people, and that even quantitative expression can be interpreted differently. This difficulty in communicating is compounded by framing the influence on the decision making of the description of acts. Contingency and outcome patient, students, and physicians were more likely to choose surgery over radiation therapy for treating patients who have lung cancer when the outcome of treatment was framed as probability of surviving rather than the probability of dying. And that's by Mosey et al. 2003. Now, in the medical decision making, concern with framing has been largely confined to the description of article. Um, the aspect of framing that has not been well investigated is the impact of different measures of risk. In clinical situation, risk may be summarized using different measures. Relative risk, which is RR, or absolute risk, which is sometimes called attributable risk, AR. If underlying risk of disease is known, relative risk can be converted to attributable risk. The two measures are logically equivalent, and in this sense, presentation of either should lead to the same decision. However, the literature on perception of risk suggests this might not be true. Now, let's go to the study objective, my hypothesis. To evaluate this question, we review a research conducted by Melanker et al. That's 1993 in their study, in which the researchers use an epidemiological method to investigate this health-related issue. In this questionnaire-based study, the authors sought to establish whether patient perception of risk were influenced by the presentation of risk in relative versus absolute terms. We hypothesize that patients will misinterpret relative risk and not account for underlying risk of disease when comparing it with the measure of absolute risk. Now, the population of study. Patients were recruited from outpatient practice of an academic general internal medicine group in rural New Hampshire. The group is part of a large multi-specialty practice and at the time of this study consisted of 12 internists and 4 nurse practitioners or physician's assistants, seeing a mix of scheduled and unscheduled works in patients. Now let's go to the type of study. This questionnaire-based clinical study of a general medicine outpatient clinic at a rural tertiary care center associated with a medical school. The study sample consists of this involved a total number of 470 out of 511 consecutive patients who agreed to answer a questionnaire while waiting for their clinic visit, as stated by the Malenka et al. In 1993. The mean age was 49.1 years, and 62.1% were female, while 51.9% had at least 1 year of education beyond high school. Patients respond to this choice of two equally efficacious medications for the management of hypothetical serious disease. The benefit of one medication was stated in relative terms, while the other was stated in absolute terms, indicate indifference to the choice of medication or choose not to enter, as stated by the authors. What the inclusion and exclusion criteria? So from August to September 1989, 8.5 days was spent in the designated waiting room in which scheduled and unscheduled patients who registered were asked to complete a 3-page questionnaire. The only patient who could not read English were visual or visually impaired or had a physical disability that limited their ability to read or write were excluded. Patients who do not provide response to the questionnaire were eliminated as well. A written informed consent was not required, though to cover the letter approved by IRB was not attached to each questionnaire, stating the intent of the study and that no unique patient identifier will be obtained. So there was no difference in the patient characteristics among those who responded to the different version of form. The first was designed to test the risk of presentation, in which the patients were asked to make a choice between taking one of the two medications. The two medications were described in costing the same with almost no side effect. However, the benefit of medication A was presented in relative terms, while the benefit of medication B was presented in absolute terms. The second situation was designed to test the patient understanding of relationship between the relative risk and absolute risk. The patient were told there was only one medication to treat the disease, and the benefits was explained in relative terms and then asked to indicate the benefits in absolute terms, as stated by the authors as well. Now, let's go to the statistical method used in this study. All data were entered using SAS-FSP with error trapping. Standard chi-squared contingency table method was used to test for the association between the categorical variables. Odd ratios OR with 95% interval as described by the Ullman and Lemenshow using parameter estimate and standard error from the appropriate logistic regression analysis. SAS-proc logist was used in this study. Now, based on the result that the author gave, when asked in the first hypothetical situation to choose a medication to treat this disease, 56.8% of the subjects choose the medication with benefit presented in relative terms, 14.7% choose the medication with benefit presented in absolute terms, 15.5% were willing to be treated with either of the medication, and 13% could not decide at all. They couldn't make their decision based on those options. So the result was not chance alone, which is S squared equals 254.3 with 3 DF. So the subjects were most likely to choose the medication whose benefits was presented in relative time, regardless of age, gender, level of education, self-reported health, experience with medical treatment for hypertension or high serum cholesterol, or question version in the second hypothetical situation, in which subjects were given the underlying risk of dying and benefit of medication in relative time and asked to indicate in absolute time. 28.2% correctly identified the expected benefit and apparently were able to convert the relative into absolute benefit. Patients who were able to equate the relative benefit with absolute benefit in second hypothetical situation were more likely to be indifferent in this choice of medication in the first situation, which is OR equals 1.84, 95% confidence interval 1.0.1 and 3.35. However, like other subjects, more than half of them, which is 58.1%, still prefer the medication with the benefits expressed in relative time in the first hypothetical situation. Now, my conclusion. The overall conclusion of this study is the majority of the patients faced with choosing between the treatment, one expressed in terms of relative benefit and the other in terms of absolute benefit. Most of them choose the one frame in relative time, and that's the main conclusion there. Now, my opinion based on this study, I agree with the conclusion of the author because the statistical test and the analysis were accurate based on the calculation. More so, it might be expected that the patient characteristics, especially the level of education, will be associated with the ability to equate relative benefit with absolute benefit. The only noted bias in this study is the size of the sample population, though not so small, but then a sample size of a study is obviously an important part of a good research, yes. So the size of the population is number one. Small size can also lead to a case of bias, such as non-response, which occur when more subjects do not have the opportunity to participate in the study. Another limitation of this study is the sequential processing was required to equate relative benefit with absolute benefit. It appears that a conditional frame from frame was generated in which the underlying risk of death was eliminated from consideration. The majority of the patient may simply have compared the relative benefit, that is, it will decrease the risk, with the absolute benefit, that is, only 8% death are prevented per 100 on 100, in choosing their answer. So the findings in this study are applicable to patients in the clinical setting to compare different measures of risk and investigate why majority of the patients decide to choose relative benefit as opposed to absolute benefit. In conclusion, this study design is ideal for the hypothesis if this limitation can be corrected in future research. Yes, so and my references, as you can see, can be taken was actually taken from these two studies, Melanka, DJ Baron, and Wernberger. That was 1993. They did a framing. They did a study on the framing effort of relative versus absolute risk, and also Mosey, O'Connell, and others, which did a study on describing treatment effort to patient. Thank you very much. All that has been my presentation. I hope you really enjoyed my quick presentation here. Thank you, Dr. Austin, and you all have a great day. Bye.